Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us for Cafe Jesus Daily Word. 82 degrees in Phoenix. We're at the halfway point of the month, March 16th. And today we're in Judges chapter 15, Samson's continuing story, good or bad, the good, the bad, the ugly, right? Let's go to the Lord in prayer and ask his blessing. Father God, thank you again for your word. These things are written for the very examples of our life and how we should live our life in following you. And when we take time to read these things and understand them, we see the nuances of things we might have missed in following you. But yet, Lord, if we ask, you reveal, and when you speak, we listen, Lord. So I ask your blessing upon this session in Jesus' name. Move me aside and speak directly to those who've tuned in today, Lord, who want to learn and honor you. Okay, without further ado, let's go. Oops, that's not what we want yet. And I messed it. I'm sorry about that. It's Judges chapter 15, and here we go. Sometimes I snap too hard. There we go.
After some days at the time of wheat harvest, Samson went to visit his wife with a young goat, and he said, "I will go into my wife in the chamber." But her father would not allow him to go in. And her father said, "I really thought that you utterly hated her, so I gave her to your companion. Is not her younger sister more beautiful than she? Please take her instead." And Samson said to them, "This time I shall be innocent in regard to the Philistines when I do them harm." So Samson went and caught 300 foxes and took torches, and he turned them tail to tail, and put a torch between each pair of tails. And when he had set fire to the torches, he let the foxes go into the standing grain of the Philistines, and set fire to the stacked grain and the standing grain, as well as the olive orchards. Then the Philistines said, "Who has done this?" And they said, "Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he has taken his wife and given her to his companion." And the Philistines came up and burned her and her father with fire. And Samson said to them, "If this is what you do, I swear I will be avenged on you, and after that I will quit." And he struck them hip and thigh with a great blow, and he went down and stayed in the cleft of the rock of Edom. Then the Philistines came up and encamped in Judah and made a raid on Lehi. And the men of Judah said, "Why have you come up against us?" They said, "We have come up to bind Samson, to do to him as he did to us." Then 3,000 men of Judah went down to the cleft of the rock of Edom and said to Samson, "Do you not know that the Philistines are rulers over us? What then is this that you have done to us?" And he said to them, "As they did to me, so have I done to them." And they said to him, "We have come down to bind you, that we may give you into the hands of the Philistines." And Samson said to them, "Swear to me that you will not attack me yourselves." They said to him, "No, we will only bind you and give you into their hands. We will surely not kill you." So they bound him with 2 new ropes and brought him up from the rock. When he came to Lehi, the Philistines came shouting to meet him. Then the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and the ropes that were on his arms became as flax that has caught fire, and his bonds melted off his hands. And he found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, and put out his hand and took it, and with it he struck 1,000 men. And Samson said, "With the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of a donkey have I struck down 1,000 men." As soon as he had finished speaking, he threw away the jawbone out of his hand. And that place was called Ramath Lehi. And he was very thirsty, and he called upon the Lord and said, "You have granted this great salvation by the hand of your servant. And shall I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" And God split open the hollow place that is at Lehi, and water came out from it. And when he drank, his spirit returned, and he revived. Therefore the name of it was called En-Hakkore. It is at Lehi to this day. And he judged Israel in the days of the Philistines 20 years.
And that is the end of the word of the Lord for Judges chapter 15. There's a lot to unpack here. There's a little bit of retaliation back and forth. So Samson is upset, and he brings a goat to his father-in-law and wants to go into his wife. Although his wife, remember, was given to his best man, so perhaps his wife's busy, and the father didn't want that to happen. Or perhaps the wife spoke badly of Samson, and the father really didn't know what the score was. But the real root of Samson's problems is his lust for women, all the bad choices that he made. He had no business allowing himself to fall in love with an ungodly pagan woman, much less think that that woman would love him. No wonder Proverbs 4:23 tells us to keep with diligence your heart, for out of it springs the issues of life, and many issues do spring forth. And failure to guard that heart, as Jeremiah said, the heart's desperately wicked, can result in a lot of trouble. Now, also, I remember a friend in Southern California who made his living off of just that verse. He did a show, a talk show called The Issues of Life. John Jolliffe, who is still around, he's in Santa Barbara now. And for about a decade, he would counsel young and old those who had issues. And one of the favorite things that he used to say is, if you can't talk it out, you will act it out. So things that are inside will boil over, just like it did for Samson here. But God uses all things to his purposes, good or bad. He works things out to his will. Now, Samson, he got upset because now they murdered his wife and his father-in-law. And he goes, well, at first, before he sets out to burn the crops and get the father-in-law's attention. And so perhaps a little juvenile here. But that really, people say, oh, he couldn't have caught 300 foxes. But a jackal often travels in packs. So it's very possible he could have caught them. Sometimes they travel in packs up to 200. Now here, I don't want you to miss this. As Charles Stanley would say, listen. Now listen. Yep. We sometimes read or glance the word without much thought. There's nothing here that says that Samson did all this by himself, and there's also nothing to say that he did this all in one day. Sometimes we read along and think, this is all just happening right now, right before us. We don't know the time sequence here. So when, like in Gideon's time, who did this? Who took down the temple of Baal? The Philistines were upset, and they find out it's Timnah and her father, and so they wind up murdering his wife, like we said, and burning their house. Well, this didn't sit well with Samson. Hey, no longer was he going into that wife, because she was long gone. And God used all this to advance his plan for redemption in Israel. Unfortunately, because of Samson's disobedience, it all happened at great personal cost to Samson. It is fair to say that if Samson was obedient, he would have furthered God's plan, and he would have been blessed in redeeming Israel quicker. Retaliation is a never-ending story, and the one that never wins in the end. For what does God say? Vengeance is mine. I will repay. If you don't forgive, the other person lives on, and they could care less about how you are. You live in your own prison of hate when that happens. When you are free and you let go and you forgive, you are no longer in that prison. That's why vengeance is the Lord's, not yours. Too many today take things into their own hands without trusting God. You may see that vengeance repaid if God's gracious in your lifetime, and maybe not, but you can count on it. God will even the score. And God repays, Samson repays the Philistines for murdering his wife. He was a one-man army. Samson also now had no family, so he could trust virtually no one. He lived like a fugitive, alone in a cave. Judah then finds Samson and surrenders him to the Philistines. Now remember, the Philistines were oppressing Israel. But the fact that the soldiers of the tribe of Judah gave Samson over to the Philistines shows just how much they were under oppression. They would rather please their oppressors than support their deliverer. God called Samson to be the judge and deliverer of these people, yet they give him back over. Sounds like the people in Jesus' day, handing him over to Pontius Pilate, appeasing Caesar instead of appeasing God and doing the right thing. Do you not know that the Philistines rule over us, Samson? Samson didn't want to hear this or even recognize it. As far as he was concerned, the Philistines should not rule over anybody. They can't even rule themselves. Sounds like our country today, doesn't it? And they bound him with 2 ropes and brought him up from the rock. And it seems like Samson submitted to this. Assuming this is true, this showed great faith on Samson's part. He was willing to put himself in a difficult position to trust God to take care of him. But we can't always be bagging on Samson. He did some good things. Samson uses the jawbone of a donkey, a fresh jawbone, and kills 1,000 Philistines. One man with God can do a lot. Perhaps this is where they got the saying, Saul kills his thousands, David kills his tens of thousands. One man with God can do a whole lot. God provides also miraculously, because Samson now was dying of thirst, and he was in the desert, and there was no hope. And he said, "Shall I die? Please, Lord, supply some water." And when we do things God's way and do God's work, He will always provide for us what we need. God is not short. His hand is not short. And here the Lord showed His faithfulness to Samson by supplying the needs of His servant to get the job done. Well, I thank you for joining us today. Please leave a comment, hit subscribe, and if the Lord wills, we will see you again tomorrow. If not, we will be looking for you on the other end. Have a good day, and may the Lord bless you and keep you. Till tomorrow.